This carving is 4,400 years old. If you have ever heard the phrase queer is un-African, I have something for you. The idea is 165 years old. The carving on Nyanknum and Khnumhotep's tomb at Saqqara is 4,400. In 1923, a British anthropologist named J.H. Dryburgh wrote down a Lango word mudoko dako and the line the Lango themselves used to explain it. A condition from God. Your grandmothers had a word. The ethnography is on a shelf. We are going to name 4 institutions, 1 copy-paste law, and the vocabulary to tell them apart. 18 minutes. Let's read carefully. You have heard the slogan. Colonialism brought homophobia to Africa, not same-sex acts. Mark Epprecht, 2008. Heterosexual Africa, Ohio University Press. Viral for a decade, and it is true. As far as it goes, here's what the slogan misses. Colonialism did not just bring homophobia, it brought distinction flattening. It made us forget that pre-colonial Africa had 2 very different things side by side: queer institutions with their own theology, and same-sex practices built on power asymmetry. The law erased the first, the slogan erases the second. Today we read both, carefully. Lesotho, 1972. A village in the Maloti Mountains. 2 women meet at a feast their families have prepared. There is millet beer in clay pots. There is singing. There is a public name for what they are about to be to each other. Motsoalle, special friend. The bond is announced in front of the village. The bond is witnessed by relatives. The bond is blessed in song. After the feast, the 2 women will visit each other's homes openly. They will sleep in the same bed openly. They will share gifts. They will share secrets. Sometimes they will share a lifetime. And no one in 1972 Lesotho thinks this is unusual. Why do you not know this? This is not an anecdote I invented. Judith Gay documented it. Journal of Homosexuality, Volume 11, 1985. Field Notes from Highland Lesotho, 1976 to 1979. Then Mfo Ematsepo Nthunya, a Basotho woman named her own motsoalle in print, singing Away the Hunger. University of Natal Press, After 9, 1996. Chapter 8, she names the woman, she names the feast, she names the songs. She names what it meant to her. 2 sources, 2 decades apart. One named scholar, one named insider. Peer-reviewed journal. University Press. Not a Wikipedia paragraph. Not a vibes-only take. Receipts. And here is the part the slogan cannot carry. Motsoalle was not tolerated. Tolerated implies someone allowed it. Tolerated implies someone could have not allowed it. Motsoalle had its own ritual, its own vocabulary, its own public ceremony, its own theology. The bonds were blessed, the way other bonds were blessed. In Sesotho cosmology, this was an institution. Lowercase 1, a standing form of life. Same shelf as God-parenthood. Same shelf as initiation cohort. Not a secret. Not a deviation. Not a workaround. A category the culture had read before any British anthropologist came to write it down. Before any colonial code came to make it illegible to anyone watching from Lesotho. Or the Basotho diaspora in Johannesburg, in London, in Toronto, in Sydney. Your grandmothers had a word. The word existed. The ethnography is on a shelf at the University of Natal Press. The songs are in Nthunya's Chapter 8. The feast happened. I am not telling you this. You are telling me. I am just reading it back, so we can both hear it out loud. A 2026 hedge, before we move on. Some scholars, including Basotho women writing today, push back on the word institution. They argue it flattens generational nuance. That motsoalle in 1920s Maseru looked different from motsoalle in 1972 Maloti. That special friend covered a spectrum from chosen kin to physical intimacy and back. Fair. Granular is better than flat. Hold that hedge. Because now we cross the continent, northeast, to Lango country, 1923, where another British anthropologist wrote down another word. Northern Uganda, 1923, Lango country. A British colonial anthropologist named J.H. Dryburgh sits with Lango elders. He asks them about a category of person his English does not have a word for. The Lango give him their word, mudoko dako, and they give him the line they use to explain it. In English, verbatim, a condition from God. A hedge before we go further. Dryburgh was a 1923 British ethnographer. His lens was colonial. His interest was administrative. He was not a queer-friendly observer. Which is exactly why this matters. A hostile witness writes down condition from God. A hostile witness writes down that the Lango themselves frame this category as theological, not tolerated, not deviant, not not a standing form of life given by their God. Stephen Murray and Will Roscoe reread Dryburgh in 1998. Boy Wives and Female Husbands. St. Martin's Press. They strip the colonial varnish. The receipt holds. The Lango said it. The Lango said it in their own theology. The Lango said it in 1923. Which is to say, long before any of us were arguing about it on the internet. Read this line carefully. The Lango, in 1923, had a word for a queer category. The word came with a theology. In 2023, 100 years later, Uganda passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act. Aggravated homosexuality. Death penalty on the books. April 3, 2024, Constitutional Court upholds. The theology that criminalized mudoko dako did not come from Lango cosmology. It came from London. Mudoko dako is older than the law that erased it, by at least 1 century of paperwork, probably by several centuries of unwritten practice, which raises the obvious question. If mudoko dako has its own theology, Lango, indigenous, conditioned from God, where did the criminalization theology come from? Who wrote it? When? Who approved it? And how did it end up in Uganda's Constitutional Court ruling on the 3rd of April 2024? It was written in 1837 by a 32-year-old British lawyer who had never been to Uganda. It was 14 words long. Let us read them. Thomas Macaulay, 32 years old, British lawyer, member of the Supreme Council of India. He has been in Calcutta for 3 years. He has never been to Uganda. He has never been to Kenya. He has never been to Nigeria. He will never go to any of them. In 1837, he sits down to draft a penal code for a colony. The code is a side project. It will sit in a drawer for 23 years before anyone uses it. But Macaulay writes one section that will outlive him by 165 years. He gives it a number, 377, Indian Penal Code, Act Number 45 of 1860, Section 377. 14 words. Quote, whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature, end quote. 14 words. 0 specifics. 0 anatomy. 0 distinctions. Who counts? Anybody the magistrate decides. What counts? Anything the magistrate decides. The vagueness is the design. The vagueness is the weapon. The vagueness flattens. A Basotho motsoalle bond and a coerced Witwatersrand mine arrangement. A Lango mudoko dako and a forced palace concubinage. An institution with theology, and a labor regime with no consent. Under 14 words, they become the same crime. Now, watch the copy-paste. 1860 India. Macaulay's code goes into force. 1861. Back in London. The Offences Against the Person Act, Section 61. Same logic. Buggery. Felony. 1864. Straits Settlements Code, Singapore and Penang. Section 377, copy. 1872 Gold Coast, now Ghana, copy. 1889, Northern Nigeria, copy. 1897 Kenya, Penal Code Section 162, copy. 1899 Sudan, copy. 1902 Uganda, Penal Code Section 145, copy. 1916 Tanzania, then Tanganyika, copy. 30-plus colonies. 1 template. The Offences Against the Person Act of 1861 drafted in London was modeled in part on Macaulay's logic from India. The template traveled to London. London polished it. London shipped it back out. The colony writes the colonizer. The colonizer ships it everywhere. This is an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. Human Rights Watch. Report titled, This Alien Legacy. Published, December 2008. I am going to read one sentence from it. Verbatim. Quote, more than half the world's remaining sodomy laws criminalizing consensual homosexual conduct are relics of British colonial rule. End quote. One report, one sentence. More than half of every anti-queer law still on the books in 2008. From one drawer in Calcutta, in 1837, the light bulb had not been invented yet. The airplane had not been invented yet. The United Nations had not been imagined yet. The law is older than all of them. And here is the thing the slogan still cannot carry. 14 words did 2 jobs at once. Job 1, it criminalized the queer institutions. Motsoalle, mudoko dako, orisha-priesthood, Buganda bonds. Job 2, it erased the vocabulary we needed to tell them apart from coerced practice. It did not just outlaw the receipts. It outlawed the difference between a receipt and a crime scene. That is the part the trilogy of court cases is about to argue. For 64 years, 4 countries, and counting. Follow the argument. New Delhi. 2009. Naz Foundation vs. NCT of Delhi. High Court reads down Section 377. Consensual adult queer sex decriminalized. 2013. Supreme Court reverses. Kaushal vs. Naz. Section 377. Back on. 2018. Navtej Singh Johar vs. Union of India. Supreme Court 5-judge bench unanimous. Section 377 gone for consensual adults. 158 years after Macaulay's draft went into force, India closes the file. And here is the contrast that should wake you up. 5 years after India buries, Section 377 Uganda resurrects it. Anti-Homosexuality Act, 2023. April 3, 2024 Constitutional Court upholds. The Ugandan scholar Stella Nyanzi names what just happened. Double erasure. The law erased the institutions in 1902. The court erased the memory of the institutions in 2024. The receipt is still being printed. This morning, Yoruba land. Pre-colonial. A priesthood older than every European border on the African map. The orisha, the deities, have gender, but not the way English has gender. The orisha have energetic gender, which means it can move. The priest is not a man dressing as a woman. The priest is a vessel. J. Laurent Maitori, anthropologist, Princeton, then Duke, Sex and the Empire That Is No More, University of Minnesota Press, 1994. Maitori documents it. The Yoruba orisha priest is, quote, metaphorically female, end quote. Not a metaphor for queerness, in our 2026 sense. A theology, in which the priest's gender is the orisha's gender, received, carried, returned. This is institution, with its own cosmology, before any colonial penal code, before any missionary handbook, before we keep going. I am not saying every orisha priest in 1750 Yorubaland would identify as queer in our 2026 vocabulary. They would not. The vocabularies are different. The theology is the receipt, not the modern label. Now, a direct address. To anyone watching who is trans-mask. To anyone watching who is gender non-conforming and tired of being told you are new. I see you. Lydia Cabrera saw you too. Cuban ethnographer. El Monte 1954. La Regla Lucumí 1980. 2 books. She documented orisha priests in Havana who had been moving between gender categories for 200 years. In the diaspora, under a Catholic crucifix. In full view. The receipt was right there, in Spanish, on the shelf, for 70 years. Here is the contrast. The textbook version, colonialism, slavery, missions, penal codes. You are told the priesthood was destroyed, finished. A museum exhibit. Now read this carefully. Havana, right now there is a Lucumí house with a shrine that has never closed since the 1800s. Salvador de Bahia, Brazil Candomblé Terreiros, where orisha priests are initiated this year. Brooklyn Botanicas on Nostrand Avenue selling herbs Cabrera catalogued in 1954. Lagos 2026 Orisha festivals running publicly, photographs filed under culture, not crime. The institution was not destroyed. It was criminalized in some places. It was forced underground in others. It was renamed. It was syncretized with Catholic saints to survive. But it never stopped. The shrines never closed. The receipt is not in a museum. The receipt is opening a botanica on a Tuesday in Brooklyn. To anyone watching from Nigeria, to the Yoruba diaspora, in Lagos, in Salvador, in Havana, in Brooklyn, in London, your ancestors had a theology. The theology had a vocabulary. The vocabulary survived the Atlantic. The vocabulary survived the plantation. The vocabulary survived. Section 377, style codes that traveled here too. Maitori wrote it down in 1994. Cabrera wrote it down in 1954. You are reading it now. Which brings us to the part of the receipt that is harder. The part the law also flattened. But for a different reason. South Africa. Witwatersrand Gold Reef. 1890s. Into the early 1900s. British-owned mines pull labor from across southern Africa. Men-only men locked into sex-segregated compounds for 12-month contracts. Family-less. Wage-controlled. Inside the compounds, a hierarchy forms. Senior miner. Junior miner. Injonga. Inkochain. Henry Tabor documents it in 1907. Report on Native Labor. Colonial Office Archive. T. Dunbar Moody names it again. Going for Gold Witwatersrand University Press 1994. Read this carefully. This was not motsoalle. This was not mudoko dako. This was not the orisha priesthood. This was a labor regime, with 4 axes of power running in the same direction: age, wage, status, mobility. The senior had all 4, the junior had none. We do not know what the junior men wanted. The archive does not record their desires. The archive records the structure. So we named the structure coerced same-sex labor. Under a colonial wage system, this was not a queer institution. Don't. 10 receipts. 6 seconds each. Institution or coercion. Watch the tag. Go. 1. Nyank Knum and Knumhotep. Saqqara. Around 2400 BCE. Reader. Jars. 2000. Institution receipt only, intent unknown, but iconography paired. 2. Pepi II and the General Sassanet. Around 2200 BCE. Flag. King and subordinate. Structural coercion. Not a love story. 3. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo. 1620s. Angola. Male concubines dressed as women. Flag. Sovereign and subject. Power asymmetry. Not a love story. 4. Mwanga II of Buganda. 1886. Flag. Monarch and teenage pages. Ugandan religious historiography contests the framing. Power asymmetry. Not a love story. 5. Love do Reign Queen Mojaji. 1970s. South Africa. Kriege's female husband framing. Hedged. Amadeum 1987 critique on shelf. Read together. 6. Nandi female husbands. Kenya into Tanzania. Transmask self-identification proxy. Contemporary. Receipt, not label. 7. Dagara gatekeepers. Burkina Faso region. Murray and Roscoe 1998. Not Malidoma. Some. Insider correction flagged. 8. Imbangala, Angola. 1614. Batel account. Published in purchase. 1625. HEDGED. Read through purchases editorial filter. 9. Mevungu, Cameroon. Beatty women's secret right. Institution gendered ritual category. 10. Azande boy-wife arrangement. Around 1920s. South Sudan. Evans Pritchard, American anthropologist. 1970. FLAG. Ages 12 to 20 bonded to adult warriors. Age power asymmetry. Not a love story. 10 receipts. Full bibliography pinned below. We can keep going, but for now, close. 165 years. 1 British copy-paste. 4 generations of African criminal codes. The law is older than the light bulb, older than the airplane, older than the United Nations, and it is still writing sentences this morning, in Kampala, in Kigali, in Lagos. Which means the receipt we just read is not a museum piece. It is a working tool, for today, to anyone watching from Lesotho, or the Basotho diaspora, your grandmothers had a word for what they shared. Motsoalle. It existed. We have the ethnography. We have the songs. We have Mfo Ematsepo and Thunya's memoir on a shelf at the University of Natal Press. The vocabulary survived. The law that tried to erase it did not write the receipt. The receipt was already there. We just had to read it back to you. To anyone watching from Uganda, or the Ugandan diaspora that left after the 2023 Act, or the 2014 Act before it, or the 1902 Code before that. Mudoko dako. Dryberg wrote it down in 1923. The condition is from God. The condition is from your cosmology. The criminalization is from London. The receipt is older than the law. I am sorry the law is still writing. I am glad the word survived to read it back. And I am sorry it took a Vietnamese diaspora kid making a YouTube video for the receipt to reach you. It should not have taken this long. So here is the question you take with you. When the next video says pre-colonial Africa was uniformly queer-friendly, or the next op-ed says homosexuality is un-African, both of them are reading from the same script Macaulay wrote in 1837. Both of them are flattening. The question is not which side you believe. The question is whether you can tell the difference between a queer institution with its own theology and a labor regime with no consent. That distinction is what the law erased first. Now you can read it back. The receipt is older than the law. Read carefully. Full bibliography pinned below. Tier 1 peer-reviewed. No Wikipedia. Petty past. Receipts. Always.